Hey, Hockey Nuts, Wayne here. Wanted to take a look at some of the hockey that's going on outside the NHL because, quite frankly, a lot of the NHL channels or the hockey channels that I follow are talking pretty much just NHL. And as you know, or if you've been hiding under a rock, you might not know that the Olympics are going on right now. So there is a tournament going on around the world that is basically featuring the best players outside the NHL. The Olympics, obviously, this year are not using NHL players. So the players that are on the various country teams are essentially the best players available that are not currently playing in the NHL. So it's a wide range of mix of players. You've got some college players on there. You've got KHL, which is the best league in Russia. You've got players out of the Swedish league, the Finnish league, various European leagues around the country, around the world, I mean. And it's just a mix of players that we don't see and hear about every single day. So I wanted to take a look at where the Olympics are right now and hopefully where they are going. Currently, as I record this, they just finished all of their games for Saturday, the 17th of February. So we're 5 days into it. So that means we're almost finished with group play. Group B is actually finished, and Group C and Group A finish tonight/tomorrow. So let's take a look and see what has gone down so far. And I don't have a fancy board for this. I don't have fancy magnets for this. So we're going to do this on my computer. All right. So going back to Wednesday the 14th, there was just 2 games on the schedule that day in the men's tournament, and they were both Group B games, which is the group that includes the United States. It also includes Slovakia, Slovenia, and this team here called OAR. What's OAR, you ask? That is the Russian team. Officially, they are supposed to be called the Olympic Athletes of Russia, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to call them the Russians because, you know, if it quacks like a duck and looks like a duck, it's a duck. These guys are the Russians. So, and they're in fact wearing red and white jerseys, if that makes any the blue is gone from their jersey, but the red and white is still there. So kind of makes it a little bit old school, harkening back to the days of the old Soviet Union, where they wore red and white exclusively on their hockey jerseys. So it's kind of a bit of a throwback. But anyway, I digress. Let's look at the games. The 2 games in Group B to open the tournament were actually both huge upsets. Slovakia came out and beat the Russians 3-2. That was in regulation. So, and because the Olympics use a 3-point system, so you get 3 points for a regulation win, 2 points for an overtime win, 1 point for an overtime loss, and 0 points for a regulation loss. So Slovakia gets the 3 points in that one. Russia starts the tournament with a goose egg. In the other game, that was also a big upset, probably even bigger upset. The United States had a 2-0 lead going into the third period of that game and ended up blowing it. Slovenia came back and tied the game late in the third and then ultimately won the game in overtime. So Slovenia gets 2 points in that one. U.S. opens the tournament with a 1-point disappointment. The next day, Thursday the 15th, in Group C, we have Finland taking on Germany and Sweden taking on Norway. And those games pretty much went as expected. Sweden with the 4-0 win over Norway, Finland with the 5-2 win over Germany. Also on Thursday, we had 2 Group A games. Czech Republic playing Korea and Canada playing Switzerland. The Canada game pretty much went as expected. That was a 5-1 win over Switzerland. And the other game I wanted to take a closer look at, that was a 2-1 win for the Czech Republic. And the fact that Korea has a team this year, I believe it is their first time that they've actually played in the Olympic tournament. They actually earned their spot in the tournament simply by being the host country. And of course, they did have to prove to the IOC that they would be at least somewhat competitive before they would have let them have a team. Excuse me. And I wanted to take a closer look at that Korean team. The Korean team is not exactly made up of players from Korea. Now, if we take a closer look at their roster, there's a number of names that don't exactly look Korean, and the players themselves don't look Korean. And it's not, I'm not trying to be racist in any way, but it just is what it is. I mean, you've got, starting with their goaltender, you've got Matt Dalton, who's clearly not Korean. I believe he's actually, he's either American or he's Canadian. Matt Dalton is Canadian. So I read an article on this team, and here's basically what's happened. The Koreans started up a few years back at the Asia League, and that's this league right here. It's an 8-team league made up of teams primarily from Korea and Japan, and there's one team from Russia. I believe this team here that finished in first place. Their season is actually already over, the regular season anyway. I don't know if they're having a playoff or not, but yeah, their regular season is all over already. The players that are playing for the Korean team is essentially an all-star team from this league here, and there are a number of players that are not Korean, not Japanese, playing in this league. There's some Canadian players, there's some Russian players, and there's a number of players that are playing in that league. And what they did, and what the IOC allowed, is that if these players are playing in Korea and they were able to get naturalized, in other words, become Korean citizens, then they could go ahead and play for Team Korea. And that's essentially what happened. All these players that you see that are clearly not Korean, Matt Dalton, Michael Swift, there's a whole number, Mike Testweed, Eric Regan, Brock Radunsky. These are all players that are expats from Canada and the U.S. Alex Plant, that seems to be all of them. But there just seems to be a handful of players that are playing for the Korean team that are not Korean, but are playing in the league over there, and they became Korean citizens so that they became eligible to play for this Team Korea. Now, by no stretch does anyone think that this team is going to do anything in the tournament, but they do have a team. The vast majority of the players on the team are actually, in fact, Korean, and it's an interesting story to see some of these guys that are playing over there. So, but that essentially is the Korean team that nobody seems to know anything about, and that's essentially what has happened there. Let's get back to the games that are going on. Where were we? Thursday. Yes, we finished with Thursday. Okay, going into Friday, the 16th of February, which was yesterday, as I record this, because I'm recording this on Saturday morning. The United States in Group B played Slovakia, and the Russians played Slovenia. The Russians came out, and they kind of, that upset that they saw in the first game kind of woke them up a little bit, because they came out and they put a beat down on Slovenia. The Russian team right now is regarded as the favorites because they feature a number of players that were stars here in the NHL, such as Pavel Datsyuk and Ilya Kovalchuk. But a lot of the Russian players, as they get older and into the later stages of their career, want to go back home and play in their home country, understandably so. And they have in fact done that, and essentially the Russian team is an all-star team from the KHL. And in fact, the Russian team, we want to call it an all-star team, but all the players on the Russian team represent 3 KHL teams. Yeah. There's 25, 26, 28, however many teams there are in the KHL. There's a number of teams in the KHL, but only 3 are represented by this Russian team. So it just goes to shows the imbalance of power there in the KHL currently, what's going on over there. So, and the standings in the KHL show, in fact, All right, I've pulled up the KHL standings, and if you look at the standings, you've got on top, they use a 3-point system there. So on top of the KHL standings, you've got SKA and CSKA well ahead of everybody else. And then in the East, you've got a big drop-off in the number of teams. Now, there's a very much an imbalance. It's not a balanced league. The NHL is, for the most part, a very balanced league, a lot of parity in the NHL, and the rules are designed to promote that. In the KHL, it's a different story. Certain teams with more money get essentially all the best players. So the KHL is a lot more predictable in terms of the ultimate results. And because there's so many KHL players being used in the Olympics, this league right now is currently on hiatus, and they will be restarting their league again after the Olympics. But all but 2 of the players on the Russian team are playing for these 2 teams right here, SKA and CSKA. The other 2 players actually play for Metallurg Magnitogorsk, which right now is currently 6th in their conference standings. But when it comes right down to it, I believe they have been in the last 2, maybe even the last 3 championships, because their playoff system works similar to the NHL, whereas in the final of their league, you're going to have 1 team from the East, 1 team from the West playing for the championship. And the last several years, it's been this team right here. So 2 players from that team, as well as the rest of the roster being made up of players from these 2 squads, which essentially the CSKA is the team that is known as the old Red Army team. And then SKA is also another government-run team, which is based out of St. Petersburg, and this one's based out of Moscow. So these are the 2 teams that ultimately, 30 years ago, behind the Iron Curtain, were the old Red Army team. So not much has changed in those years over there in Russia. So anyway, going back to the team Russia, because of the fact that they're using a lot of players that would be NHL stars if they chose to come over here, that team is regarded as the favorite for this tournament, and in this case, they woke up and they beat up on Slovenia. The other game on Friday featured the United States playing Slovakia, and the United States came out on top in that game, but barely. They scored their goal in the 42nd minute. That's kind of the international way of keeping time, which is basically 2 minutes 51 seconds into the 3rd period. And they held on for the 2-1 lead in that game. And in the other 2 games on Friday were Group C games. Finland played Norway, Sweden played Germany, so they basically flip-flopped from the first games. And Finland came away with the 5-1 win in that one, pretty much as expected. Sweden, though, had a little trouble with Germany. I watched parts of that game, and Germany is known for playing a very tight defensive game. They essentially play what we call here in North America as the trap game, where they just sit back and wait for their opponent to make a mistake and then pounce on it. But Germany was unable to get through to score a goal, and Sweden barely hung on for a 1-0 win in that one. That leads us into the games of today, where late last night, Canada played the Czech Republic, and the Czech Republic actually ended up winning that game in shootout. Now, I actually went to bed with the game tied 2-2. I just got too tired. I knew I wanted to get up to watch the American game this morning. So I ended up just going to bed, and I figured figured Canada would end up winning that one. And when I went to bed, it was 2-2 in the game, but ultimately that ended up being the final score. And then, of course, overtime, no one scored, and then it went to shootout, and it actually went 8 players deep in that shootout before a winner was determined. And The Czech Republic scored 2 goals in that shootout, and Canada scored just 1, and Czech Republic comes away with the win in that game in overtime. So Canada gets 2 points out of that one. Czech Republic gets 1, but ultimately that's how that game ended up. In the other game in Group A for Saturday, actually happened at 2:40 in the morning, so probably nobody here in the U.S. or Canada saw that game, but it was Switzerland taking on Korea, and Switzerland won that one going away 8-0, which if Korea loses 8-0 to Switzerland and Canada beat up on Switzerland, I would hate to say what's going to happen when Canada plays Korea tomorrow morning our time anyway, Sunday morning. I think that game will ultimately be a win for Canada, to be sure. That's going way out there, folks. All right, the other 2 games on Saturday were the Group B finales in the round robin, and that one featured Russia versus the United States. I got up this morning to watch that one, and then the other game, Slovenia played Slovakia. So, in the first game we'll talk about is Slovenia-Slovakia, 2 teams that aren't expected to do much. That game ultimately ended up being a pretty good game. That game went all the way to a shootout, and Slovenia ends up winning that one in a shootout, 2-1. So that ends up being a 3-point game, with Slovenia taking 2, Slovakia taking 1 in that one. In the other game is a game that I got up early this morning to watch, and ultimately was a huge disappointment. Russia taking on the United States. I was hoping that the United States, which is a team that is built on speed, would be able to compete with the Russians or be able to keep up with them. And Russia came out and showed how experienced they are. So number 1, they've got experience. Number 2, they've got a bunch of players that are used to playing with each other, and the United States is just a hodgepodge mix of players from all over the place that before this tournament have never played together before. And watching that game, it was clear that that was the case, because there were a lot of missed passes with the United States. There were a lot of cases where they just did look like they didn't know where each other was going, or they looked disorganized, the Americans did. And the Russians were just firing and clicking on all cylinders, and Russia essentially dominated this game. I had a few complaints a bit about the officiating, but ultimately Russia was the better team in this game. So, we can complain about officiating all we want, but it doesn't change the fact that the Russians were the better team tonight, and they beat the Americans 4-0 in that game. So, showing the Americans do definitely have some work to do. All right, so those are all the games that have taken place thus far. All we have left in round robin competition, we have 2 Group C games and 2 Group A games. So those are taking place late tonight into tomorrow morning because of the time change. The first game is taking place at 10 o'clock Eastern. That is Germany versus Norway in Group C play. And then at 2:40 in the morning, Czech Republic is playing Switzerland. At 7 in the morning, tomorrow morning, Canada is playing Korea. And also at 7 tomorrow morning Eastern, Sweden taking on Finland. So the best games of that group of 4 games, in my mind, is that Sweden-Finland game. So I'd love to see that, but I'll be on my way to work tomorrow morning when that game goes on. But it doesn't really affect the Americans in any way, and it's just I wanted to watch it for the pure entertainment value. So after those 4 games are done, we head on to elimination rounds. And with that in mind, let's take a look at where our standings look right now. All right, here we are. In Group A, we have Czech Republic, Canada, Switzerland, Republic of Korea. They all 4 of those teams still have 1 more game left to play, but at this point, you've got the Czech Republic sitting at 5 points, Canada with 4, Switzerland at 3, Korea with none. And Korea has scored 1 goal and have allowed 10. So Canada at this point, I'm going to say, is going to get their 3 points to put them at 7. And the Czech Republic-Switzerland game, I would expect the Czechs are going to win that game. So your top 2 seeds in the A are going to be the Czechs and the Canadians, and they should ultimately, the top 2 seeds in each bracket, by the way, earn a bye in the next round. They don't have to play until the quarterfinal round. So the bottom 2 teams will have to win 4 games to win the gold. The top 2 teams will only have to win 3 games to win the gold. So that's how essentially the elimination rounds work. And we'll look at the bracket here in a minute. In Group B, that's the group that includes the United States. You have Russia, you have Slovenia, you have United States, Slovakia. And it's actually a wide open bracket right now. But this bracket is actually finished. So Russia takes the top spot with 6 points. Slovenia, U.S., Slovakia are all tied with 4 points each. And that goes down to tiebreaker, which I believe the first tiebreaker is head-to-head. So Slovenia played the United States. Slovenia won that one. And, of course, U.S. beat Slovakia. But don't quote me on it. I'm not entirely certain how the tie-breaking system works. By the looks of it, it's head-to-head because Slovenia ends up with that number 2 slot, and the U.S. will have to play a play-in game to advance. So they'll have to play an extra game. In the Group C, you have Finland, Sweden, Germany, Norway, and this one pretty much is going as expected. Finland and Sweden have already locked up the top 2 seeds. Germany and Norway are going to fight for that last or that 3rd spot. But ultimately, Finland, Sweden are going to earn the byes there. Germany, Norway are going to have to play an extra game. All right, let's take a look at the bracket. The top team in each bracket gets the bye, and then the best second place team gets a bye, which right now looks like is going to be Sweden. Unless Canada wins their game against Korea, then they'll get the bye. Everybody else will have to play a play-in game. So let's take a look at that bracket, and this is how it lays out. So you've got your 4 teams, 3, 4 that earn a bye. Everybody else will be playing in, and then we go from there. So by this time tomorrow, we will know, this bracket will be filled out. We will know who's playing who, and we'll go from there. So that's it. That's all there is for the Olympics update. And I know this one was a bit long, but I had a week's worth of stuff to catch up on. The updates from here on out will be a little bit shorter. So if you like this one, click like. If you really liked it, click subscribe. And until the next video, we'll talk to you later.